Hello and welcome to Channel 51 News, as I am joined by Josh Bernstein of jbushow.substack.com. That means it is the US report, but it is a very interesting week, Josh, because the Australian Prime Minister has met with the US President, and we have got some very interesting details that our Australian viewers are going to think, wow, I didn't see that, I didn't understand that, and sometimes what we've been fed in the past, well, it's confusing because I'm calling the clip that I'm going to play for you shortly Trump, Albo and Goff. How do you put those three together? Well, that will all be explained in a moment. But Josh, over in the US, things are crazy. How has your week been?
Oh, it's been interesting, I guess, to say the least. We've seen a lot of interesting things as far as this No Kings rally here in America, which has been an absolute joke. As a matter of fact, it is the lowest attended rally in the last 15 to 20 years, according to most estimates. Give you an idea, for instance, in Chicago, which is a 29% black city, less than 1% of blacks actually went and protested. The majority of people were not minorities. The majority of people were older white Americans. Basically your baby boomers that were radical 60 feminists and weirdos and everything else back in the day. And it's never left their bloodstream. And so they're still stuck on stupid. And they went out there and they, protested for whatever silly reason. And remember, there is no king, because if we did have a king, they wouldn't be able to do this, number one. And I always say this, if they really want to protest a king, hand in your citizenship, move over to the United Kingdom, and then you can protest King Charles.
Well, absolutely. And if there were a king, you wouldn't have a government shutdown, would you?
No, of course not. We would just do everything by edict, by order of the king, right?
This is exactly right. You make a really interesting point, an observation about the attendance at the rallies, because according to mainstream media and the left wing, they're saying that these rallies were enormous. We saw big crowds, certainly in a number of cities. But what the point is, if only 1% of the black population of Chicago out of the 29% that is the population, so less than 3% of that population are attending, well, it's irrelevant. But it also goes to pass. So if, let's say, for example, you do get a majority of a population or the entire population of a city to go and rally, well, that tells the government, uh-oh, we're in big trouble here because they're all against us. But if only a small sample, then you have to extrapolate to say that they are against us, when in actual fact the boots on the ground are not. Okay, people say, yeah, whatever, but big numbers are big numbers, and we had 1 million people in Canberra out of 26 million during the COVID period, and that is significant, but it's still only 4% of the population. The point is that it is a fast way, if the whole country is against what the government is doing, to create revolution on the streets. But if it is only a subset, then it is no substitution for what you're actually trying to do, which is to change the way politics is going in your country at that time. So the real way that you do that is through the political system, by getting people elected, getting to parliament, changing laws through debate, the slow process. But the thing is, they're not transferable. And so what we're having here in Australia is this great quandary. People are happy to get up and rally and get to 1 million, and in our other rallies they're much lower, but there's still a couple of 100,000 people. Now that's not going to change anything. The politicians will say exactly what Josh just said, which is they weren't well attended and they don't really mean anything. But in politics, 200,000 people joining a political party, becoming members, automatically in this country takes over the running of that party, bar that party changing the rules to prevent the rank and file, which means that the party's corrupt, and you've proven it simply by your efforts. And therefore there'd be the rise of another party that would take that one over. So what I'm trying to say is that whilst 200,000 people or even 1 million people in Australia on the streets is a good start, it doesn't change anything. But what does is that those same people in those same shoes joining a political party or even parties goes a hell of a long way to being able to change the political structure of the political parties that do get to make the decisions. And I've been talking about this for a long time, but it is a great reminder for people that that's the way. You have to take your political activism further and further and further. And shortly I'm going to show you a clip of how far the left goes, the far left goes, with their resources in protecting their own when they are doing evil on the streets of Portland, Josh.
Well, look at Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. He was elected and he's cleaned up all the crime. It's one of the safest countries in Central America. Look at Viktor Orban in Hungary. He's cleaned up that country completely. They are incentivizing people to have more children. They are being very careful when it comes to immigration and things of that nature. You have the AfD party in Germany. And, you have a lot of these different parties around the world that are starting to wake up. And even if they were small at one point, I mean, perfect example is Nigel Farage, right? I mean, he's on the cusp, on the precipice, if you will, of really taking over power. Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. So there's a lot of examples of small parties that have accumulated a lot of power and centralized it to take on the establishment. And we saw that in America with the Tea Parties in 2014 around that time. So again, we can do this with, I've always said, the people are the power. It's not anything else. It's we are strength in numbers. And that's kind of what I talk about in Preserving Liberty, by the way, as well, because we are strength in numbers. And what you can glean from that is that the majority of people don't know that they possess all the powers to change their government. And if they do know it, they're afraid to use it. And so what we have to do is get rid of that fear and show people and teach people how to use their power in a positive way. And this is another example of it.
Oh, it's fabulous. Look, in a moment, I'm going to play this clip that I'm going to have us watching on the side just to gain a reaction for you, the audience at home. But it's a big deal because it's putting it all together. Trump's meeting with Albanese a few days ago, how it relates back to Australia, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Council on Foreign Relations, and Gough Whitlam and what he tried to do 50 years ago. Now, most people who are going to watch this are going to say Gough Whitlam bad, Lima, the Lima decision, etc., which was basically to take manufacturing offshore. This is going the other way now and explaining what we've done here in Australia by extracting our minerals and then sending them to China to buy them back at as manufactured products like batteries at a huge markup, and what Trump has managed to do. I think what we'll do is we'll play that for you now, and we'll come back and have a discussion. But take a look at this, guys.
Trade Counselor Peter Navarro walked into the Council on Foreign Relations and delivered a declaration of war against the British Empire's control over American policy. And a few days later, Donald Trump signed a rare earth minerals deal with Australia that the mainstream media is telling you is aimed at China. But here's what they're not telling you. That deal is really aimed at dismantling Britain's centuries-old imperial grip on Australia and spreading Trump's America First dominance. Navarro accused the CFR of embodying an ideology that is, quote, comfortably wedded with Wall Street and the multinational corporations that love open borders, cheap offshore labor, and an endless stream of subsidized imported goods. Now, what made this speech even more enjoyable is that the CFR's current president, Michael Froman, was sitting right in front of Navarro. Froman was Barack Obama's trade negotiator and negotiated the infamous Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Navarro went scorched earth on.
Then came the Trans-Pacific Partnership, forgive me here, Mike. CFR sold it as a geopolitical rampart against a rising China. Yet, the TPP would have surrendered much of America's manufacturing base, including our crucial auto and auto parts sectors, to Japan, Vietnam, and ironically, ultimately, China itself. President Trump saw this very clearly and tore up the TPP on day one. I was standing right behind him on that beautiful day. This is what the Council on Foreign Relations has never understood. Weakening our industrial base has never strengthened our strategic position. It has only invited aggression. That's why in Trump world, we do not trade off economic security for national security. We believe economic security is national security. Memo to CFR, you cannot project power if you surrendered production. You cannot deter aggression when your supply chains run through your opponent's ports. You can't lead the free world if you can't make what the free world needs.
Now, I'll give Navarro a diplomatic pass when he says that the CFR has never understood. They understand exactly what they're doing. Because the Council on Foreign Relations is a creation of the British Roundtable, founded in 1922 to smother the American tradition in economics and foreign policy and to bring the United States back into the British imperial fold. Let me tell you what happened 50 years ago, the last time an Australian prime minister tried to exert economic sovereignty over Australian resources. Because what happened to Gough Whitlam in 1975 is key to understanding why this Trump deal is so threatening to London. Australia's natural resources were owned by British mining companies like Rio Tinto Zinc, BHP, and other Anglo-Dutch corporations, which were all intertwined with the British monarchy and the elites. Prime Minister Whitlam had a plan for, quote, resource nationalism, unquote, to give Australia control over its natural resources, to process them in Australia, and to use that wealth for the benefit of Australians. He was also looking to the Mideast to independently finance this, which didn't make the City of London very happy. So the empire struck back. In November 1975, the Crown-appointed Governor General, Sir John Kerr, did the unprecedented. He dismissed the democratically elected prime minister and unilaterally installed the opposition leader as caretaker. Tens of thousands protested in the streets, but it didn't matter because Sir John had used the reserve powers of the Crown to remove a prime minister who threatened British imperial control of Australia's resources. So Donald Trump just offered Australia exactly what Whitlam tried to do: industrial development and economic sovereignty. But here's the difference. Whitlam was trying to do it alone in Australia. Trump is offering American partnership and investment in Australia as part of a broader strategy to dismantle British financial control. Britain can't use the Governor General to fire the President of the United States. They've certainly tried other means, impeachments, the 2020 election, lawfare, assassinations, but because we're a constitutional republic and not a British satrap, they've failed. And now they can't stop Australia from accepting American partnership instead of British extraction. Now, there's one more fun fact tying all of this together. During yesterday's Oval Office press session, Trump was asked about Australia's current ambassador to the United States, Kevin Rudd, who had previously called Trump, quote, the most destructive president in American history, a village idiot, and a traitor to the West. Trump shot back publicly in the Oval Office, I don't like you either, and I probably never will. Now, I hope you're not surprised when I tell you that Ambassador Rudd is a senior advisor at Chatham House, the sister organization to the CFR that Navarro just eviscerated. Trump and his team are systematically confronting the institutional network of British imperial control. So let's connect all the dots. Navarro walks into the CFR and declares their era of policy control is over. 3 days later, Trump signs a deal that restructures Australia's economic relationship away from British imperial extraction and toward American industrial partnership. These aren't separate tactical moves. They're coordinated strikes in the same strategic war.
Doesn't it put a lot together, Josh? Fills a lot of gaps.
Yeah,
because
let me kind of fill in a couple of things. As far as what I called back then Obama trade, I actually covered that extensively back in 2016, 2017. The late Curtis Ellis, who was an excellent patriot, he's no longer with us. He's the one that exposed the TPP back then in the days around Obama. We should call it Obama trade. And one of the most insidious parts of the Trans-Pacific Partnership was the fact that it allowed foreign companies and countries to sue the United States for a number of different things, whether they felt that there was a trade imbalance, whether they felt that there was currency manipulation, even though there wasn't. It didn't matter what it was an open carte blanche of litigation. And also, it would have zapped our sovereignty and our ability to be competitive on the world stage. So what President Trump has been doing since day one is one-on-one trade. The only one he didn't do was a one-on-one trade deal is when he redid and renegotiated NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was signed into law by Bill Clinton. That was an absolute disaster, almost leading to what is known as the Amero, in which we actually would have gotten rid of our currency and we would have went with Canada, the United States, and Mexico and created something called the Amero. And they were going to have the Trans-Pacific Highway going all the way through the United States, Mexico, into Canada and back. So thankfully, that hasn't happened. But what President Trump did is he then renegotiated it into the UMCA, right? The United States, Mexico, Canada agreement. But what has he done since? He's done specific agreements with India just today, Scott Bessent, Japan, Vietnam. He's doing a deal directly with Australia. He's doing a deal with NATO. He's doing a deal with the United Kingdom. He's doing deals with Germany. He's dealing with individual countries rather than putting them all and lumping them all together in a global deal, which is what the left wants, because they want to take away the sovereignty and the power from the United States and give it to their globalist masters. President Trump is smart enough to recognize that, and that is why he does individual deals rather than large conglomerates.
Yeah, it's very important to be able to understand the difference, and specifically with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. One such example would have been that Huawei phones, who were caught out for spyware, and if they were not allowed to trade in the United States under the TPP, they could have sued the United States government for presumed loss of earnings, for goodness sake.
You got it.
And if that's the case, if you can have an onslaught of foreign corporations suing your country, and why would any government do that unless they were trying to self-sabotage? You literally are going to send your government broke, which would have them going cap in hand to the globalist overlords to say, look after us. Oh, sure, come in. We will look after you. We'll take care of those debts for you. And now you're going to be part of the one world government. What a sinister way to want to bring down your country. And Obama must pay heavily. Now, what was very interesting about that was that Hillary Clinton, when challenged on the TPP in that 26 election campaign, went silent. She said things like, oh, I'm not aware of it, or et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, what was really interesting was that Bernie Sanders was very much against the TPP, said it was bad, as did Trump. Now, that for me said to me some very important things, that they were at the time both anti-globalist. That was where I took it at the time. But when Trump got rid of it on day one, as we've just learnt there from Peter Navarro reminding us, that said to me that he was definitely not a globalist, he was a nationalist. What was disappointing for me at that time was how Bernie Sanders gave Trump very little kudos after that. He did make mention that it was a good move, but that was the end of him when he had an opportunity. But Bernie was too ignorant, I suppose, or too naive to notice that what was really going on behind the scenes was the globalists versus the nationalists, but and then just wanted to go down this particular pathway. So you see Bernie now as a useful idiot, knew what was bad, but
Correct.
that was the end of it. And that's why for many people they dropped Sanders. And I'm not just saying myself, but my personal story was that of 5,000 followers, or friends, followers, whatever, on Facebook at the time of Trump getting elected, 3,000 at least more were Bernie Sanders fans, and most, if not all of them, overnight became Trump fans overnight without anyone ever saying a word. No one was ever on Trump's side, but realised what had happened was that the anti-establishment candidate was in. And then by the time January came and he got rid of the TPP, they're all vindicated. And they go, yeah, this makes sense, and they've been supporters ever since, which I find fascinating. That some people are ready to jump when they realise that the information they had was wrong, but others will dig their heels in and they will go down with the sinking ship, the Titanic, no matter what goes on. And we're going to talk about more about that today.
Yeah, and let me just add this. I've actually interviewed Peter Navarro twice. As a matter of fact, I interviewed him as soon as he got out of prison after his 4-month prison sentence. Probably he was out maybe a week when I actually had a chance to interview him. But he has been someone that has been at the forefront of trade in the United States. And not to mention, he's an expert on China. So this deal may be able to pull and extract the power away from the king and from the monarchy in England. But ultimately, if we look past England, what do we see? We see the red dragon. And that's what this is really all about. This is about taking power away from China. Because let's not forget, China has 90% of the refinery production ability of these, finite minerals and precious metals and things like that. We don't have that. And so what we're trying to do is we're playing catch up because the Otto Penn administration was giving everything away. Just help us steal the election in 2020. You can have whatever you want, right? So we're now playing catch up. We're going to have to do something with Greenland because it's too close to America's borders to have sit there and have the Chinese anywhere near it. So that's going to be an issue. We're going to have to figure something out. We don't have to, quote unquote, take Greenland. But what we need to do is work out a security agreement and say, I don't care what the Danish are doing. And by the way, they're sterilizing your women out there in in Greenland. I did a whole full expose on that a couple of months ago. But besides that, they're not helping you. They're not doing anything for your security. We'll take care of you. We'll supply your security. We just need to get to those mineral rights that are under 90% of ice or whatever it is in Greenland. And so I think that's a big part of it. But then again, doing these individual deals, right? Doing one with the UK, doing one with Australia, doing one with all these different countries around the world. I think it creates leverage, global leverage for the United States of America. And more importantly, it resets and calibrates the balance of the geopolitical power structure in America's favor.
Now, Josh, can people watch your interview with Peter Navarro?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's on the Substack. I believe both of them are on the Substack right now. You can go to the top of the Substack where it says Josh's best interviews or whatever, and you scroll through and you'll see a whole bunch of people. I mean, not just Peter Navarro. I mean, you'll see a lot of other Trump officials. You'll see people from Hollywood. You'll see people in sports. So many different people are up there. So
fabulous. Now, if you go to jbushow.com, does that redirect to your Substack?
The jbushow.com is gone. Too many attacks from China, from Canada, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Belarus, from you name it. And I just couldn't afford to keep it up anymore after 5 years. So I pushed everything and migrated everything over to Substack. So jbushow.substack.com is the hub, and you'll find anything and everything you need right there.
Well, fabulous. Well, at this point, given that we're doing a few promos, I'd like to just put up my thing here for the work that I'm doing on the other show, The 51st State, which is on Australian National Review. You can go to anr.news or go to the headlines, on X at ANR Headlines. You can watch most of those shows, and at Jason Q Citizen 1 on X as well, but you will find it also at channel51.com.au. But I just found it interesting that story there with Trump and Albanese plays very hard down that line of the 51st state and the idea of Australia having different relations, working within. It just feels like with what we've seen now with Prince Andrew this week, with this the sort of stories coming out. And for those that want to watch my interview with Andrew Eborn that's just been uploaded to Substack and will be out later on other social media sites, we talk specifically in great detail about Andrew, about Virginia Giuffre, but also about King Charles himself. And I found it interesting that no one really cared when Charles met with Trump recently. There was all these posters of Epstein and Trump, but no one bothered to put up a picture of Jimmy Savile and King Charles, and no one bothered to put up a picture of Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew whilst they were in the UK. It just seems odd with what's going on. But Josh,
selective outrage is what we call it.
Well said. And looking on now, the behaviour of Andrew is it's just, you can't apologise for it. But the reason that I brought it up with Andrew Eborn last night in the recording was that where does the royal family go at this stage if they're going to pretend it's damage control? They're virtually, Andrew is implicated now in underage sex, even with abuse, sadomasochistic, at least if it's not him in the room. He's apparently involved in an orgy with Virginia Giuffre, 8 other women, and Jeffrey Epstein, for goodness sake. And you just wonder, is this the tip of the iceberg of the disgusting stuff that we've been talking about ad nauseum since 2016? When we found out about Pizzagate, which effectively is the same thing but coming out of different circles.
Yeah, that's a good point. Look, I think her brand new book, what was it called? Nobody's Child. Yeah, Nobody's Child has a lot of new revelations, and it's interesting that they stripped him of his Prince title, they stripped him of everything, but his real downfall, I think, was that horrific interview that he did. I think it was with the BBC, if I'm not mistaken, many years ago. And it was just an absolute train wreck. And that was really the demise of him. I mean, because he's like, I don't know who she is. I don't know anything about her. And the lady's like, well, isn't this you with your arm around her? He's like, well, yes, of course it is. And she's like, well, how do you explain that? He goes, I can't. Well, obviously you can't, because you were sleeping with an underage girl who was 15 years old at the time. And then he's talking about how he doesn't sweat, and it was his kid's birthday party. I mean, the whole thing was just a train wreck. And I think from there he lost all credibility. The veil came down, if you will. And from there, he's been persona non grata, certainly in the higher British circles. But more importantly, he needs to be held accountable for what he has done. And I'm assuming there's so many other victims. Where are the 7 or 8 other girls? Why aren't they coming forward and speaking out loud publicly that yes, indeed, I can confirm what was in Nobody's Girl, that this is indeed the truth because I was one of them. I mean, let's take them down, because here's the thing. If you can take down Prince Andrew, you might be able to take down the royal family at some point for covering it all up. And honestly, the UK would be better off without a monarchy, in my opinion.
Well, I don't disagree. I ask the big questions all the time, and if they're not serving the people, and the king's a globalist, and he puts Islam ahead of the Church of England that he's meant to be the head of, it doesn't make any sense. How can you be a servant to two masters? That is the whole premise of the 51st state. You got Albanese doing a deal with America, supposed to be under the king, who's a globalist, and we are in AUKUS because we're defending against China, our biggest trading partner, and Albanese and Daniel Andrews are best mates with the Chinese regime. I mean, these people can't be servants to all of these masters. We have to pick one and work our own way, or we become truly independent, which means we can't be part of a monarchy. We have to become a republic on our own if we're going to do deals with China and do deals with the US and et cetera, et cetera. But what you can't do is doing what's going on right now. And I guess that's where we're now asking the big questions. But at the same time, Australian politics is painfully slow. You've got a combination of both the establishment Liberal Party and the Nationals still arguing over net zero or not going down net zero. There's a split within both parties. There is talks of people leaving them, such as Barnaby Joyce and others that want to leave the National Party. They can't work together. And what happens is that an unappealing Labor Party Albanese government just sails straight through because the other side is disjointed. But you know what? When Paul Keating, the former Australian Labor Prime Minister, said in politics, you can back one thing, that is self-interest, because it's trying, it will come together at some stage. I think it's important that we understand that things will turn around. But when there's so much confusing crossing of different ideas there, it's very hard to know where to get on board. And here in Australia now, there is a call for a Reform Australia Party to get up, which is interesting to sort of mimic what's going on in the UK with Nigel Farage. The only problem is that there's no real leader and there's no real money. So as an idea, it's a good idea, but you can't just create a political party just so you've got a name that matches something else when you don't have your own leader as part of what's going on. And so that's the problem for me. So here in Australia, I've been involved with a couple of different parties, two on the left and two on the right in my time from Labor, and now I'm working with Gerard Rennick's People First Party, because in Gerard's party, I recognise that there is a genuine leader involved there. Former Senator Rennick from Queensland has the goods to be a leader, a terrific economic scholar, if you will, knows what's going on and knows how to rebuild that way, but also the ability that he's a conduit between the third party movement and the coalition from which he comes, which is very rare. So if anything, you would hope that maybe there is at long last, there is a will to merge the parties, the third parties, and so maybe this is the way forward here in Australia. But the only way you get to do that is to apply the appropriate political pressure and join a party. And look, to make this a shameless plug for the party that I've joined, peoplefirstparty.au. If you want to become a member, get on there. It's $50 at this stage. It's all it is. Put your name down, you become a member, go join a branch in your local area and get involved in the rank and file movement and have a say in party policy and what's really going on. You could do a lot worse.
Let me add one thing. It sounds to me as though Australia right now in 2025 is going through the beginning stages of what America was going through in 2014. We had a Republican establishment rhino party that would not listen to the constituents, would not listen to the base and the supporters and people. And so what happened from that? Well, they grew into the Tea Party. And from there, the Tea Party got big enough to where people joined it. And we also had endorsements for people that were going to represent the Tea Party constituents and things like that. Marco Rubio was an original member. Ted Cruz was an original member. Rick Scott was an original member. So there are still some of them. Tom Cotton, I think he was one of them. Bozeman was another one. So these are obviously American politicians. But what I'm trying to say is you need a charismatic Trump-like leader who has the ability, has the business acumen, but more importantly, the bravado, the ability to look people in the eye and say, I don't think so. That's not how it's going to work. Here's how it's going to work. And you need to coalesce behind one of those people, because it sounds like Australia in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years, if you can build up one of these alternative parties, you can then be the next one that puts America first, in this case, Australia first policies and principles forward. You have your own candidates. And now look at MAGA. Look at Make America Great Again. Look at America First. We are not only in the government, but the majority of the party is solidly behind all of these principles and values. And so it can happen. It takes time, but it takes grassroots activism, as we talk about here. How do you start a movement? One person at a time.
Well said. Now, I want to play you a short clip. I didn't schedule it, but I've just uploaded it. This is from Amy Wallace, being interviewed yesterday by Emily Maitlis, who interviewed Prince Andrew back on the BBC. This is talking specifically about this 8 girls, just to give you an idea of the depravity that's involved here.
We also know from this memoir now that there was a time when Prince Andrew re-met Virginia Giuffre on Little St. James Island, Epstein's Island, and had sex with her and 8 other girls and Epstein as well. Clearly, I'm not asking you to name the women, but do you know who they are? Is there a chance that they will want to come forward now this has all been made public? Are they talking to you?
The 8 other women are a mystery because, so to be just direct about my answer, I do not know who they are. The key thing about them was that they were very young and they didn't speak English. Her impression was that they were from perhaps some Eastern European country, and she was told that they had been procured by Jean-Luc Brunel, who was the French modeling agent who had discovered some big name models, but also was one of Epstein's closest associates, was one of the people who procured girls for him around the world. At one point, Virginia was told he sent triplets, I believe, who were 12 years old from France, and then he abused them, and then they were flown back to France. This is an evil dude, and the other key thing in that scene is that Epstein and Prince Andrew joke that these girls who don't speak English are the best kind of girls because you don't have to talk to them. So she didn't know who they were. She couldn't communicate with them because she didn't speak their language and they didn't speak hers.
But just to stand back from that, you are clear that there are at least 8 other women now who could testify, if they chose to, that Andrew had been on that island having sex with underage girls.
If they are still alive, they could do that.
Interesting. I covered this story that we're talking about here, and at the time it was 2 Slovakian or Yugoslavian sisters, blondes, that the French guy procured for Epstein and brought them over to the island. So I would assume, again, I don't know for sure, but I would assume that 2 out of those 8 women or girls at that time were these 2 blonde sisters, because I remember covering it extensively back then, because it was part of an affidavit when he was arrested and he got that sweetheart deal in Florida by Acosta. What I will do is I will try to find that video and repost it. because it was quite compelling. And perhaps now that sadly she, is dead because she didn't kill herself and was murdered, I think that at this point, perhaps maybe some of the things that she put in her book are now going to maybe come to fruition. Maybe these girls are still alive, and maybe they will come forward. We should only hope.
There was also talk of 3 12-year-old triplets being flown over by Brunel and then flown back. So this just gives you an idea of what we're up against here. It is absolutely sick. Now, I want to move on now to, let's look at Russia, because Trump's talking about the final problem to be solved. But there is now sanctions being talked about. First of all, we're going to go to Putin himself, because this is escalating to nuclear testing. Let's take a look.
Да. Добрый день, уважаемые товарищи. Сегодня у нас плановая, хочу это подчеркнуть, плановая тренировка по управлению ядерными силами, как только что доложил министр обороны. Давайте начнем работать. Пожалуйста, слово начальнику Генерального штаба Вооруженных сил Российской Федерации Герасимову Валерию Васильевичу. Прошу вас, Валерий Васильевич.
Товарищ Верховный Главнокомандующий, на тренировке предлагается отработать порядок действий по санкционированию применения ядерного оружия. Практические действия будут осуществлять подвижный грунтовый ракетный комплекс ЯС государственного испытательного космодрома «Плесет», ракетная подводная лодка стратегического назначения Северного флота «Брянск» из акватории Баренцева моря.
Wow. They're serious, aren't they?
Did they say where the target was going to be?
Well, we don't know specifically more detail at this stage, but it's the gesture. And there's Putin there with his green manila folder, listening to these plans, underlining, for example. What's he underlining, and who's he going to tell that to? But the end result now is that whether or not this is the great movie and whether or not it's planned or not, but the Americans, President Trump and Scott Bessent, are now talking about furthering sanctions. I'll play this clip because this is the reaction.
As you know, and the world can see, President Trump is the president of peace. He's done peace deals, trade deals, tax deals, and part of the peace deal, the real remaining final conflict in the world, this would be the 9th one that he has found a solution to, would be between Russia and Ukraine. President Putin has not come to the table in an honest and forthright manner, as we'd hoped. There were talks in Alaska. President Trump walked away when he realized that things were not moving forward. There have been behind-the-scenes talk, but I believe that the president is disappointed at the where we are in these talks. So either this evening or first thing tomorrow morning, we are going to be announcing a substantial increase in Russia's sanctions. I'm not going to give you the exact sanctions, but I can tell you that this will be one of the largest sanctions that we have done against the Russian Federation.
Moving on. So
Dangerous
it's
world
obvious.
we live in, huh?
Yeah, well, absolutely, and this is the point. Now, look, it could be coming to the sum of all fears part of the movie. It seems that we're getting there. My questions are: is this meant to be a leaning on Ukraine so that there is a capitulation and a surrender in this regard, but then they are going to declare Putin a madman at this point, or is it just a bluff, or will they continue to resist? But at what point do you resist when you have a nuclear warhead aimed at you?
Great questions. I guess my first reaction is that Vladimir Putin is somebody who is patient and is not trigger happy. And the reason I say that is because he's had all these years. He's been called a monster. He's been called a communist. He's been called a dictator. He's been called everything for almost 10 years, majority, of course, by the Democrats, right, with the Russia hoax and everything else. I mean, if you think about how they have demonized this one world figure, it's actually amazing to me that he hasn't retaliated since and in any way that would be fearful and harmful to the United States or our allies. Do I think it's saber rattling? It's hard to say at this point. I think President Trump talking about Tomahawk weapons to Ukraine obviously made them take this next step and say, well, if you're going to hit deep within inside Russia, then we're going to get our nuclear capabilities ready to, to possibly retaliate. I don't know. It's getting a little crazy, I'll be honest. I wish President Trump wouldn't say things publicly that the media could run with and things like that. I think that there are certain conversations that need to be secure conversations between world leaders. And he's joking around saying, what do you think? Should I give your buddy Zelensky Tomahawks? I mean, he's telling that directly to Putin and vice versa. And I think that part of his diplomatic ability is terrible. And I'll say that as a Trump supporter. I think he needs to be quieter, more reserved, and in some respects, take this even more seriously, because a nuclear proliferation or war is going to be catastrophic for the entire world. And yes, he may have solved 8 wars, but if you can't solve this last 9th one, what does it do if, God forbid, it turns nuclear to the other 8? Doesn't even matter in the footsteps and footnotes of history. So let's hope that cooler heads prevail here. I understand that we're going to put sanctions and things like that, but this war needs to come to a peaceful conclusion. I've said all along that I believe Zelensky is the wrong leader to negotiate for peace with Ukraine. And I think that he is the impediment to peace considerably. But I think they both are at this point. And President Trump is trying to be the mediator. And that's a position that not too many people would envy.
When you consider the attack on Iran for the nuclear facilities resulting in Iran taking that shot at Qatar in that building that was emptied out, it was to save face and it was to end that conflict. And yet with Russia and Ukraine, he's done the opposite. He's poured petrol onto the fire by implying that he'll give Tomahawk support to Ukraine to fire back at Russia, which then leads Putin to go out with his green manila folder and talk about this nuclear test. And I wonder if Trump is doing this for the optics to show the escalation. But obviously, when you get to that stage, you then realise that this can only end up with an absolute disaster, and it's to stop it. But it does feel overly theatrical, but we're used to that from Trump. So you play both sides. It's dangerous if it escalates, but the point is that whilst it's just rhetoric at this stage, it's a play to get people on side. But at the same time, you just feel like the world is numb to this. Like they don't really care. The world is so off on another tangent, on another timeline, that you mention nuclear war, they're like no big deal. But if you mention ICE, goodness me, if you mention that illegal people can be kicked out of your country, they lose their minds. Let's play you a clip now from the latest of the ICE threats.
Don't forget where you're standing. This is South Central Los Angeles. They are not the only ones with guns in this city. They're not the only ones, and don't forget that. And I don't say that because we're calling for violence. I'm saying that because the people have every right to defend themselves against masked, unidentified gunmen with AR-15s and other military rifles. The people have every right to defend themselves.
Josh, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's getting a little bit scary there. Look, the only thing I can say at this point is that we've got to clear out these rat's nests of illegal aliens in these major blue cities. The Democrats secretly want, and I've said this before, safe cities. They don't want crime. No one wants to live in crime. But they don't want their illegal voting base to disappear, because power to the Democrat Party is more important than safety, clearly. Otherwise, they wouldn't be fighting to have these people removed, right? So you have to look at it not on the surface, but past the surface. Why would normal people, which these people are clearly not, but why would regular people in a blue city be fighting against the people that are trying to remove the criminal elements from their cities? You can't come to a rational conclusion that they don't want to live in a safe neighborhood. So the only other thing that you can think of is the fact that they're paid, number one. They're being funded, number two, by foreigners, a lot of them that I've already discussed ad nauseum. The newest one, Christopher Hone, out of the UK. Of course, Neville Singham, that's another one. George Soros, the Open Society. So they're being funded. But the other part of this is they don't want these people removed, because if they're removed and they redo the census, they're going to lose even more seats. And that means they what? They lose power. Everything with the Democrats has to do with retaining power. And any threat to them retaining that power is going to be met, or they're going to try to come back with violence. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. Well, let's cross now to Portland with the discovery of an Antifa safe house. I mean, it was kind of known before, but this is just interesting to have a peek inside. Take a look.
Get the fuck back.
What are you
bitch.
doing? What are you doing?
That's what I thought.
I'm just checking it out. I'm on a public sidewalk. Close the window if you don't want to see in. There you go.
You're so fucking closeted,
You're ugly.
You're a fag.
You look stupid.
What else you got in
Wait,
there?
can we
Huh?
talk? This is live?
Going into the Antifa safe house. Yup.
Why the fuck you stalking women? Fucking minors and shit. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Why are you stalking this person?
She assaulted me.
She assaulted you? Do you have proof of that?
Yeah, my black eye.
Your black guy? You didn't just
You don't have a black eye.
I don't see it. Get hit by your boyfriend or something?
All right. The assault suspect is in the safe house.
Assault suspect? Are you in stop now? Are you able to designate someone as a suspect?
The assault suspect is in the safe house. Get away from me.
How about that?
Easy solution. Very easy. ICE agents, boom, break down the door, guns a-blazing, arrest everybody in there in one shot. Close it down. Probably have to send in the bomb unit because I'm sure they're cooking meth in the back or whatever. So you want to make it safe for the community, but just knock it down. Just get rid of it completely and arrest everybody in there under terrorism charges. And if they're violent back, hey, sorry, shoot them. I'll say it publicly. These are nothing but a bunch of cuck soy boys, okay? I'll say it publicly. These Antifa scumbags, that's who they are. They're not tough. They're astroturf. They're pussies, if I can say that. The reality is they're no match for ICE or even the National Guard. And if the Portland police want to get in the way, well, then they ought to watch out too. Because the bottom line is we got to clean up these cities. And how can we sit here and have a safe haven for these criminals to sit in their little rat's nest without destroying it? I don't get it.
Now there's a real movement behind the scenes to find out who's paying for the rentals for these particular properties, and if they connect back to likely where they are, you're going to be able to lay down some charges under RICO for racketeering, etc. Because you know that none of those people there are paying the exorbitant rents that would be required to rent such a property in the heart of Portland there. So really interesting, but it's coming to a head, obviously. Meantime, we're at 3 weeks in almost, I think, on the government shutdown, and this is the reaction when asked in an interview as to what's going on.
Shutdowns are terrible, and of course there will be, families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously, but it is one of the few leveraged times we have.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's just unreal.
They don't have leverage. Let me explain something, okay? I've done a lot of research on this. If we cut every single Democrat program, every single one that the government has, and if we get rid of all Democrat expenditures and we get rid of any of their policies that we're allowed to cut, just cut it all, that will be enough money to keep the government closed for the next 5 months. 5 months and about between 14 and 19 days, if you want to get real technical. At that point, you would also have about 3 months worth of tariff revenue to pay the military, ICE, and the National Guard with. So if the Democrats think that they have close to 8 months worth of leverage, well, then they're even stupider than I thought they were.
Well, that takes them, goodness me, what are we up to, June? And the elections, the midterms would be only a couple of months after that. You can't see how much more damage can possibly be done. And at the same time, there's now arguments here about food stamps, that there's no money for food stamps. So people are going to start screaming because they can't afford to put food on their own tables. This is an interesting case. And of course, New York, now with the arrival of ICE over there, is also interesting, that there's now been arrests going on. And at the same time, you've got Mamdani coming up for his election in early November, and just leading New York right down that pipeline. It's hard to believe, Josh, that the heyday of New York really was the Giuliani period, where he cleaned it up in the lead up to, September 11 was the end of that period. But when you went to New York in the mid to late 90s, it was the true heyday. It couldn't have got any better. Is it recognisable today at all from what it was a quarter of a century ago?
Not at all. The last time I was in New York was in 2019, when sadly my father passed. And so I went back for the funeral and things like that. That was about a month and a half to maybe 2 months before the shutdown of New York and the whole COVID hysteria and the pandemic and all that came into fruition. And I remember going through Times Square at that point, and it was pretty. I mean, there were still homeless people, but it wasn't dangerous. It was kind of clean for the most part. And as soon as that shutdown happened, New York completely changed, and quite frankly, has never been the same. And at this point, probably never will be the same, because there's not going to be another Giuliani that comes into play and cleans up the city. I would love to see it happen, but I don't see it happening. And if, God forbid, Zoran the moron, Mamdani the commie wins, you're going to have a New York that you won't even be able to recognize if you think it's bad now. And the reality here, and I'll say this publicly, as a conservative, as someone that is a huge supporter of Republicans and conservatives, Curtis Sliwa, get the hell out of the race now. Immediately. Get out. All you are doing is splitting the vote and making it that much harder to block Mamdani. And I don't care who hears this, okay? Now, New York has a choice. You can embrace communism and Islamofascism, or you can elect a somewhat sane but corrupt grandma killer who likes to fondle women. Those are your choices. And quite frankly, I'd rather have the grandma killer that fondles women than a all-out Islamofascist in Mamdani. So the only way that's going to happen, the only way that's going to be stopped, is if Curtis Sliwa gets the hell out of the way.
It's just an unbelievable scenario. The city that was once the best in the world is a shadow of its former self. In many ways, I wish Jackie Mason was still alive to mock Mamdani like nobody else could do when he was alive. He used to do comedy routines about all the mayors and governors of New York in his hometown. And I remember him talking about Mayor Deakins, and talking about how he was going to solve crime. And he said, and already crime went up. And this is what we're going to see now in New York. It's just it's quite extraordinary that the once greatest city in the world is it's in big trouble. At the same time as the United States is preparing to for its golden age, it just seems at some strange loss here. Now, if he is elected Mamdani, can he? Are they fixed terms for the mayor in New York? There's no way that he could be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, there is fixed terms, and you can only run a certain amount of times and things like that. But we have to Mamdani-proof New York, and I think that's what President Trump is doing right now, by going in there and trying to clean up the city before this election in case, God forbid, he does win. But the other part of this is cutting back federal programs and getting rid of them right now, especially during the shutdown. If I was Russ Scott, I would be concentrating solely on New York. Then I'd go to Chicago, and then I'd go to Portland, then I'd go to Seattle, then I'd go to Detroit, and so forth and so on. All these blue seas, and I would make sure that we are cutting every single one of these programs that are sponsored by Democrats, every single one of them, but especially in New York. Because if you do that, now he's not going to have the money because he needs the financial money. He's not going to have the money. You can't raise that much taxes and revenue on the people. I mean, you can't do it. So the only way he can implement what he wants to implement is through grubbing off of the federal government. That's the only way he can do it. So I say, Mandami-proof the city. And quite frankly, I've called for it publicly, and I'll say it again. Denaturalization. Let's get rid of him completely. He shouldn't even be allowed to run. Matter of fact, if I was President Trump, I would already have had him deported. And I don't care what the left says. I don't care how you say, oh, how dare you take away our candidate? Well, what did you do with your own candidate who was brain dead, right? You subverted the will of 14 million Democrats and installed your queen, did you not? So again, we ought to denaturalize a lot of these people. We can do that. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has already talked about possibly doing some of this stuff. I say do it. Get rid of them all.
Well, it could, stranger things have happened, and a radicalisation against a radicalisation. Who knows if that's the way it's going to be? Well, Josh, we're getting to the end of the show, and the East Wing, there is an AI mock-up, if you will, of what people are saying is going to get up the noses of Democrats as Trump builds his new ballroom that is privately funded.
I love it.
Meantime, Hillary is losing her mind as well. It's not his house, it's your house, and he's destroying it. This after Hillary had to send back $20,000 worth of furniture that she decided to take after leaving the White House. Well, Dan Scavino, wait till she sees the name of it. And of course, it's not the first time that US presidents have modified the White House. This has been done over, many times over the years. And the other last story, just quickly, is that we're now learning that big names are out and not being credentialed at the Pentagon. Washington Post, CBS, NBC, ABC, Reuters, and Fox. And look who is in. There you go, the post-millennial National Pulse, Gateway Pundit, TPUSA, Jack Posobiec, Tim Pool, Lindell TV. How about that? Incredible.
Yeah, we should have jbushow.substack.com as another one, but I'm still kind of censored and still kind of rebuilding. But I will say this is a wonderful policy. And I said this today, if you refuse to wear a badge and you're walking around in the most secure location in the entire world, which is the Pentagon, the State Department, and you then refuse to sign a pledge that says that you will not leak classified or unclassified information, then you're not a journalist, you're a traitor. And you should be replaced with all these people that are not going to do that are going to sign these things. And it goes to show you that because there could have been criminal implications if they got caught, that's why none of them signed it. Why? Because they're all part of the establishment and the deep state. And that's why we call them what? Prostitutes.
Well, there you go. You nailed it. And that concludes our show for you today. Check out channel51.com.au or jbushow.substack.com, and you can become a paid subscriber to either or both if you like, and it certainly supports the work and the costs of putting all this together for you. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you all next time.